Hello and welcome to Wolfman Gaming. This is my Uncharted 4 Crushing Difficulty walkthrough, and this is Chapter 2, also known as Infernal Place. And after our fight with the other inmate, we are now in handcuffs, being led through the prison by one of the guards. And the beginning of this chapter is a bit on the slow side. It mainly consists of us walking. So it allows me to talk a little bit about a subject that I talked a little bit about in my previous video, and that is that Amy Hennig was or wasn't the director of this game. She is known to a lot of people as Nathan Drake's mom. She was the director of the first 3 games. But during the production of this game, or the development of this game, she left her job at Naughty Dog. And Neil Druckmann took over this game. He scrapped everything and redid it from scrap, more or less. And Neil Druckmann is maybe most famous for The Last of Us. And that kind of shows in this game. Or it shows quite a lot, because the tempo in this game, or the pacing of this game, is a lot slower than the previous parts of the series. There is a lot more focus on storytelling and exposition in this one, I think. Even though there is a lot of combat, as many of you may know, but it is paced slower. And when I started editing this walkthrough, I was thinking about giving this game my, so to speak, The Last of Us treatment. Because if you watched my walkthrough for The Last of Us, which was the first one I ever did, about a year ago now, I trimmed out everything except for combat. The only thing I kept in were all the sequences where you ended up in a fight or you needed to stealth past enemies. And I was thinking about doing it with this game, because sometimes the combat is quite spread apart. I have no idea if that was a correct sentence. Either way, you get what I mean. But I decided to not do it that way. I wanted to do a complete walkthrough for this game. Because unlike The Last of Us, there is a speedrun trophy in this game, as I mentioned also in my last video. And I think you have to beat the game. It is something about 7.5 hours. 7.5 hours. Good luck beating this game in half an hour. So I wanted to keep in all the gaming, just so if anyone wants to use this guide, just to keep track of where they're supposed to go in the levels. So I wanted to keep in everything, and there was nothing like that in The Last of Us, so I could skip everything except for the combat. But now we have gotten past the slower parts, and now we are gonna do some platform. We are introduced to the grappling hook, which is a mechanic. I think I talked about it in my The Lost Legacy guide. I am not a big fan. I think the grappling hook is a really fun mechanic. But if you have watched my videos previously, you will probably know, or if you know me, I believe very much in being consistent. And since this is the 4th adventure where we follow Nate, and the grappling hook is something Sam, his older brother, taught him about when they were kids, then why haven't they used it before? Of course they haven't used it before, because they didn't think of it before this game, probably. But I kind of have a hard time with when they put in a mechanic that isn't consistent with things with things they have done before in the series. If you remember in the second game, where you're heading through those big ice caves, I think it's chapter 17 with Tenzin, where you're supposed to platform around, and Tenzin has a grappling hook thing, and Nate is very skeptical about his skill in using it. But since Nate has used it since he was a kid, according to this game, he should be more reliant on Tenzin's skills in using said grappling hook. But it's always a problem when you do another installment in a series, which is supposed to tie into the background. Because whenever you do a sequel, you always want to do it more extravagant than the previous installments. Especially, this is not a prequel, but when they do prequels in series. Whenever they have done a number of games in a game series and the story has finished and they still want to cash in, then they start making prequels. But since it is a sequel, you still have to do it more dramatic and more cool, and you want to have great weapons and cool abilities, and sometimes that doesn't add up with things you've had previously in the series that happens later on chronologically. I think that sentence made sense. A great example of that, which I'm gonna talk about as soon as we're done with this puzzle. What you want to do in this room is move over to this symbol on the wall with the sun and the moon. And if you press the big button in the middle of the gamepad, he will look at his map, or if it's a letter, and he will notice that it has the same symbol when he folds it together, and you pull out a big rock in the wall. I think it was marked with either 7 or 12, the biggest rock in the wall, and he will found a cross. But getting back to prequels and sequels and all that good stuff, a perfect example of this is the God of War series. Great hack and slash series. Love those games. But in God of War Ascension, which to this date is the last game in the series, there is a new God of War game coming out soon. But God of War Ascension is supposed to take place before all the other games in the series. I think it takes place just before God of War 1. It's been a few years since I played it. But in that game, Kratos is in a prison because he has breached his deal with the gods, with Ares. And this prison is located on the back of a titan, I think. And one of the first bosses you beat in that game is the titan, on which's back that prison is located. Which is a really cool thing. Of course, one of the most fun things about the God of War games is that series' humongous bosses that you take on every god in ancient Greece. But when I played that game, I got a bit hung up on that thing, because in God of War 1, Athena asks you to kill Ares. And that is also one of those moments, because Kratos says something like, "Is it even possible to kill a god?" Or something like that. But in comparison to all the things you do during your adventure in Ascension, killing a god should be like a normal Tuesday morning in Kratos' life. But getting back to this game, I'm not gonna whine on about too much about prequels and sequels and everything in between, because now this game may it does demand my attention, as it should demand yours. Now we are in the laundry room and we are in a big fight. This is a more in-depth tutorial on fighting, because we got a little bit of taste of it out in the prison yard with the first guy, and this fight can actually be surprisingly hard. It took me a few tries to do this, mainly because a few times actually it was not always my fault, and according to gamer logic, dying is never ever your fault, it's always the game's fault. But sometimes if you get really unlucky, you can die before this fight starts, more or less. And here we have it. You press circle to dodge blows. And that is something I really recommend you use in this game. It will get you out of a lot of trouble in this fight, or if you try to go into combat or fist combat, which is something I don't recommend. when you're playing this game on crushing, because you die quite quickly. I think actually this is the game in the series where you die the fastest on crushing. I'm not 100% sure, but I think this is the hardest installment in the series by far, because first 3 games are, as high as difficulties go, quite easy. The first one can be very challenging at times, but this one, because all the fights, or almost all the fights, always consist of a lot of enemies, and as I've mentioned a lot of times, I'm probably gonna say it again, they love spamming those grenades. But don't try to stay away from melee combat whenever you can. Always try to use what little cover you get and use your weapons wisely. This game, the difference, or one of the differences between this game and the previous games in the series, is that you don't get as much ammo in this game as you do in the first 3. So that is something you're gonna have to remember. I think I talked about it in The Lost Legacy, because it's built off the same principle as this. Which makes sense, since it is an expansion to this game. But ammo is a bit more scarce, so you're gonna have to make your bullets count a little bit more. Don't be too overzealous, because then you will end up in a situation where you run completely out of them. And now we are trying to make our daring escape. I've been talking about the combat so much, so I almost forgot that the video was running in the meantime. But heading out of this prison is very easy. There is just one route to take. I don't think... Yes, I have died. I was gonna say that I never died on this, but actually I have. But that was completely my fault. It was me being sloppy and not moving out of the way of bullets fast enough. But it's quite easy to get through this. Just stay moving, follow Sam and what's it called, Rafe, your other friend. Follow them whenever if you get lost, just see where they are heading and follow their lead, was what I was gonna say. And after you've taken out those guys, I'm gonna... You're not supposed to climb up on that crate. Instead, we are supposed to move it out of the way, and we are gonna go into these old... I don't know what these are supposed to be. Are they some kind of ventilation tunnels, or just maintenance tunnels if in case one of these pipes breaks? Probably maintenance tunnels, now that I think about it. And we can head on. But I like how this section is designed, because it really is tense. You have the alarm blaring, people are firing at you from everywhere. And even though this is scripted not to kill you, just to stress you, they have been really successful in doing so. And going over here, you can choose to either run up those stairs or just jump over that little, I was gonna say abyss, but that's a bit over dramatic. And climb up in this tower, and we can jump over here. And we are getting close to the end. Also here, just be fast. And we can jump. That's more what I call an abyss. If you fall down there, you're dead. And then we can go up here, and we are gonna go into a little cutscene that I of course have trimmed out. As soon as he jumps over, just press triangle and grab him, and I'm not gonna expose what happens during that cutscene. If you haven't played this game and you don't know what happens, I'm gonna let you find out for yourself. And after that, all you have to do, all that remains of this chapter now, is to run through these, whatever it's called, bushes is not the right word. But after you get through them, we jump into the water, and that is the end of chapter 2. So I want to thank you very much for watching, and I will see you again in my next video. So until next time, this is the Wolfman signing off.